Hello, and welcome to Living Beyond Limits. I am Reverend Jennifer Spear, and we are a part of Centers for Spiritual Living. I'm so glad that you have joined us today for this online service. And so I'd like to start the service today by just inviting you to close your eyes and to bring to mind someone that you care about, someone that you love, perhaps even someone who is having a challenge in the world today. Perhaps it's somebody from our own spiritual center or not. And just to send them some of your love right now. To imagine your love just wrapping itself around them and buoying them, supporting them. And to see them actually standing in their own wholeness and in their own authentic power, filled with the light of the divine. And to know that as you do that, you are actually sending that person a blessing. How wonderful it is to get to participate in blessing each other and in starting our day like that. And so as we begin this service, I'm going to invite our practitioner, Carol Borwick, to come forward. She's going to lead us in an evocation as we begin to evoke an awareness of the presence of Spirit that is always right where we are, and do a contemplative reading for us. And so I invite you to just kind of begin to settle into yourself, to let go of the busyness, and to just become present, and to allow the sound of this bowl to just help you slow down and go a little deeper.
And as I enter our sacred space, I come with wonder and with gratitude for another beautiful day that has been created for us. All of the abundance of good that is here for each of us, and the wonder of knowing that I am one with this Creator, as every person is one with the Creator. And as we go within to our quiet, sacred space within, that is where we meet Spirit, the divine Spirit within, where we receive our inspiration, wisdom, clarity, love, peace. All the things that we desire are there for us, as we are always supported by Spirit, by life. I know this is true for me. It is true for every person in this world, that the light, the love, the power, and the peace of God is at work in every person and in every situation. And how blessed we are this morning at Living Beyond Limits to have Reverend Jennifer and her dedication to the message and to our community. I know we are so blessed this morning and inspired by her sharing that has come from Spirit. And may we be inspired to reach higher and greater, to experience more of life. I bless everyone who is watching the video, and I know that each one is receiving the message that they desire and need today, and that the day is unfolding perfectly in every life with joy and thanksgiving. I say thank you, God, and so it is. Good morning. My reading this morning is taken from the Science of Mind magazine, February 2016, and it's written by Eugene Holder, religious science practitioner. It's entitled Commitment. Consistent spiritual practice takes commitment. Living a life of peace, joy, and abundance takes dedication to your practice. Whatever your practice is, keep it consistent. It's that consistent, holy communion with your higher self that allows you to let go, surrender, and trust that your good is at hand now. I wonder what would happen if we all were committed to being our natural, brilliant selves, not from a place of ego, but from a place of love. Can we commit to being the love of God that we were created to be, even if it's just for today? Think about how your life would be changed if someone came to you, showering you with joy, love, and bright ideas. Just think how someone else's life would be changed if you did the same. Today, let us commit to being ourself with a capital S. Let's commit to loving ourselves enough not to let anyone or anything keep us from living from that place of beauty, joy, grace, and power. Today, commit to your spiritual practice. Commit to surrender. Commit to love. Mm-hmm. So it is.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Nice. Thank you very much. And so I'd like to share with you now our mission statement at Living Beyond Limits. And if you know it, I invite you to join me. And if you don't, I invite you just to take it in. It goes like this. We are a sanctuary where people can discover and reveal the presence of God within their own being and experience their oneness with all life. Through the realization of this inner presence of love and peace, we give way to the evolutionary impulse of the divine and become a beneficial presence in the world. And so that's what we are up to here at Living Beyond Limits, is we are giving ourselves the opportunity through the talk and through the readings and through the prayers to get back in touch with the truth that that infinite presence indwells our own souls, that it is the very essence, our own spiritual essence. And that means then that that essence of our own innate beingness is the presence of love and a presence of peace and a presence of wholeness and of power and of harmony and of balance and of order. Because what happens when we come to recognize that that is innate to our beingness, we come to the world differently. Sure, we would like the world to be loving and kind and tell us that we are whole and enough and good enough. But we're not dependent on the world telling us that when we know and are in touch with that within us. Then when the world is not reflecting that back to us, we are able to tap into that and bring forward the love that isn't being shown, or bring forward the peace that isn't being expressed, or stand in the truth of our own wholeness. And that puts us in a place of power and a place of choice and causes us to be a beneficial presence to ourselves and to those that are around us. And because we are all connected and part of this whole, we actually are acting as a beneficial presence to the whole, because our consciousness goes out like ripples on a pond and affects the whole. And so I say thank you to each and every single one of you for answering the call of your own spirit, to be walking this path and to be bringing that presence of peace and love and goodness into this world in a way that is beneficial to everyone and everything. So thank you for that. And before we begin our talk right now, I invite you to have handy something to write on and something to write with. And so if you need to pause this for a moment to do that, or just grab it and have it sitting near you. And so it feels so good to hear our practitioner Carol do that invocation. And I think it feels so good to us because it enables us to unplug from the world, and it allows us to unplug from our lives, and it allows us to move back into that felt experience of our own spirit. You know, we each need to be able to unplug. We need to be able to unplug from the busyness of our lives and from the difficulties that are happening in the world. We need to unplug from doing and from striving and to just allow ourselves to be instead of do. We have a need to rise up out of beyond our ego's perspective. That ego's perspective where the material world is the only thing that is real and the only world that we live in. The ego's perspective that we must always work and strive. That ego's perspective of deadlines and difficulties. That ego's perspective where things are often problematic. From being stuck in traffic to having a family member that's sick that you must care for, to not getting along with your spouse or your boss or one of your coworkers or neighbors, to not having enough money to pay the bills that are due, to dealing with the pandemic and wars and politics in our country right now. You know, living in this material world has its challenges and difficulties. And yet, we really long for a sense of well-being within us. We want to know that we are safe and that we are secure. And we want to know that we are going to be okay, that things are going to be okay, and that we are okay. Yet living in this material world will always have its challenges. That's just kind of the nature of life. But the thing that enables us actually to move through those challenges with a greater sense of peace and a greater sense of well-being is doing spiritual practice. And so when I say spiritual practice, I am actually referring to meditation and prayer, including affirmative prayer. I am referring to journaling and spending time in the silence. I'm talking about spiritual study, whether that's taking a class or reading a book that is written by some spiritually enlightened person. I'm talking about forgiveness and being of service, or even attending one of our services or doing connection and spiritual practice that we do on Thursday night. All of those things are different types of spiritual practice. I read a quote this week that I absolutely loved by Wayne Muller. He said, "The heart of most spiritual practice is simply this. Remember who you are. Remember what is sacred. Remember what you love. Remember what is true. And remember how you wish to live." And I'm going to say it again. The heart of most spiritual practice is simply this. Remember who you are. Remember what is sacred. Remember what you love. Remember what is true. And remember how you want to live your life. And so what if then the entire purpose of your spiritual practice, irregardless of what the spiritual practice is simply to remember who you are? What if your spiritual practice is simply to remember what is sacred? What if it's to remember what you love and what is true and how you want to live your life? So what if then your meditation practice was simply a way to help you remember who you are? That you are not your thoughts or your feelings or your reactions, but instead that you are something much greater than those. That you are something that is beyond those thoughts and feelings and reactions. And that in that place it enables you to access your own wisdom and your own peace. What if you're doing affirmative prayer were simply a tool to help you remember the truth? And that means then it isn't about having all the fancy words or saying it just in such a way or expounding. What if it's just to help you remember the truth? What if your spiritual practice of gratitude is simply to help you remember what is sacred to you and what you love? And what if attending Sunday services with us is simply about helping you remember how it is that you want to live your life? That it's just a reminder of that. And so the title of my talk today is, What's the Point? So what is the point of spiritual practice? And what I'm talking about is the fact that doing spiritual practice helps get us unstuck from our repetitive and dysfunctional thinking. It helps us get unstuck from our worry and our fretting and our doubting and our stress and our fear. Doing spiritual practice allows us to shift gears. It enables us to see things differently. And in turn, then, we get a sense of inner security. An inner security that comes out of the recognition of our own eternal beingness. The part of us that cannot be harmed or injured or damaged. We gain a sense of security out of feeling that. And out of that practice also comes the awareness of the goodness of life. And that the goodness of life is always right where we are. It shifts our perspective from problem to the goodness of life. In our spiritual practice, we actually give ourselves the space to hear our own inner wisdom. And when we hear our own inner wisdom, that then enables us to make choices and decisions that are good for us, and decisions that make us feel good and that support us in life. And in turn, then, we have a sense of ease because we're doing what is right for us instead of what is right for someone else. And so I heard Kathy Ann Lewis, who is a minister at Centers for Spiritual Living, tell the story recently that when she was a young woman of about 19 or 20, her mother wanted her to learn how to do typing and shorthand so that she would always have something to fall back on. And she said, everything in her said, I do not want to learn how to do typing and shorthand. In fact, I don't ever want to fall back on anything. I want to always be moving forward. And she talked about how grateful she was for being able to hear her own inner wisdom and that insight and that leading that has led her into this rich and full life. And we all have that, but it requires creating space so we can listen to that wisdom inside of us. And that often requires getting out of our repetitive thinking and our fear and our worry and our stress to be able to hear that wisdom. And I know there have been times in my life when one of my spiritual practices has been journaling, of getting up and writing every single morning before I get out of bed. And I know that there was one time, and I would write often when there was a problem, and I'd write about the problem, just kind of download and get it out of me what was going on. And I was not getting along with someone. In fact, I was having an argument with them. And so I was writing about what was said and what was done and how I felt about it. And then I get all that out and I get to the place where I ask the question, what do I need to know here? And what I heard is, this person has their own path that they are walking. That let me let it go. That's a wisdom from my own soul, not from my ego thinking. My head would have never come up with that. But spiritual practice enables us to create some space to hear that wisdom. Ultimately, spiritual practice, the purpose of it, is it enables us to live from our self that is not conditioned by conditions. It enables us to live from the part of ourself that is free, our authentic self. It allows us to live from our own love and beauty and joy that is innate to our own nature. And the problem is, as you well know, we don't always make time for spiritual practice. And I think the biggest reason that we don't make time for spiritual practice is because we forget how beneficial it is to our well-being. We forget how good it feels and how much better we feel after we do it and how much more peaceful and centered and balanced and at ease we feel. I think also we get caught up so much in what feels urgent rather than what's really important in the bigger picture of things. I mean, think about it. How many times during the day do you check your text messages or check your emails? Because it feels urgent to do that. Or even after you've made a meal that you have to go in and clean up the kitchen right away. Do you know those dishes aren't actually going anywhere, that they'll be waiting there for you when you're done? We forget sometimes also that even 5 minutes of doing a spiritual practice is enough to enable us to unplug. It's enough for us to be able to shift gears. Even 5 minutes can return us to ourselves. That part of us that is not conditioned by conditions. Marianne Williamson said, "The goal of spiritual practice is full recovery. And the only thing you need to recover from is a fractured sense of self." Spiritual practice allows us to return to ourselves. We get to come home to ourselves, to the part of us that is not limited, the part of us that is not injured, the part of us that is not flawed. Instead, we return to our own wholeness and our own wisdom, our own spirit, our own unconditioned self. Ernest Holmes said, "The kingdom of heaven, which is a kingdom of wholeness, is within." We return to that spiritual kingdom of heaven, of wholeness that lives within us. Sometimes I think we don't do spiritual practice because we think we don't know how to do it right. We just finished a class and people talked about that. They don't know how to do affirmative prayer right, or they don't know how to do meditation right. And that keeps us from practicing it. But you know what? Affirmative prayer and meditation are practices. We practice them. And as we travel this path, and as we practice them more and more, they become deeper and they become easier. But have you ever seen a kid learn how to ride a bike? You know, first of all, they start with training wheels. And then when they take those training wheels off, they are wobbly. And those handlebars are going back and forth like this, and they don't really know how to steer yet. It takes practice to learn how to do something new. There are so many things to support you in spiritual practice out there. There are so many apps that you could put on your phone. There's even one called the Pocket Practitioner that is full of affirmative prayers that you can download and read, and they are by topic to support you in any given situation. There are online meditations, including guided meditations. There is online meditation music. There's even oming. There are tons of videos that you can om along with them. There are tools, there are classes, online, at church, other places that they're offered. All of them to support you in growing, in deepening, and in deepening your spiritual practice. And sometimes I think we don't do spiritual practices because we think we don't see immediate results. And then we think if we don't see immediate results, then either we must not be doing it right or it must not be working. But you know, I planted sweet peas in October. And when you plant sweet peas, the first thing you do is you have to soak the seeds overnight. And then you plant them, you make the little holes and you plant them. And I did that. I had a mound and the little divot around the outside for the water, and I put up a trellis with the string that goes like this, and I watered those seeds about every other day for weeks, and nothing happened until day 25, and I watered them every other day. The soil was prepared, the trellis was up, and nothing. About 25 days later, all of a sudden something popped up. And as they grew and they got about 3 inches tall, I started going out there and propping them up on the trellis that I'd built. And the breeze would come along and blow them off the trellis. And I'd prop them back up the next day because I wanted them to be able to get the sun and attach themselves. And then the gardener would come and he'd blow them off. That happened for months before they finally grew and attached themselves. So I planted them in October and they started blooming in April. It took them all that time to grow and to get big enough to be able to produce flowers. And they were beautiful. And they smelled so good. And it was so much fun. But it took patience, and it took tenacity, and it kept just keeping on is what it took. So allow yourself to be a beginner. Allow yourself to just know that you're learning a new skill and that it takes time. That it takes time and patience and tenacity. Didn't it take you time and patience and tenacity to learn how to ride your bike? And if you hadn't taken that time, you wouldn't know how to ride a bike today. And how about when you drove a car? How easy was it to shift gears with that stick shift? And how close were you to the curb when you made those turns? It takes time to learn how to do that. And now you don't even have to think. Clutch, gear, let go of the clutch, slowly push on the gas. It's just automatic. You don't have to think about it anymore. You would not believe the first haircut that I ever did. I cried afterwards. It was so uneven, I was supposed to put it in rollers that I couldn't even get it around the rollers. But you know what? The following summer, I had off from school. I did $6 haircuts in my bathroom the whole entire summer. And just so happened at that time that punk rock was in. So all my high school, because I was in high school, all my punk rock high school friends, that's whose hair I cut. And then it didn't even matter if I made a mistake. It didn't even matter if it was uneven. It was crazy hair. But that's how I really taught myself how to cut hair. That's how I really learned. 3 months of practicing. Ernest Holmes said, if every day we are just getting a little bit better, if things are just getting a little bit better, then we are on the right track. And so let your spiritual practice be a practice. Let it help you remember who you are. Let it be there to help you remember the truth. And any single bit of insight that you get is a success. Any little bit of peace that you are able to discover is a success. Any bit more loving you are, or more gracious you are, or more grateful you are, that is a success. And so I have some questions to ask you. This is the time for your pencil and paper. And so my first question is, what type of spiritual practices work for you? And what helps you get unstuck? What is it that helps you access your spirit? What is it that helps you remember who you are? What helps you access your own wisdom? What practices help you remember what is sacred and what you love? And what is it that helps you remember what is true? What is it that helps you remember how it is that you wish to live? Or what helps you be a beneficial presence in the world? And the last question is, and what would you like to try? And so my invitation to you is to commit to a spiritual practice. Commit to doing something. And if what you're doing right now isn't working for you, or it isn't working as well as it used to, try something different. Try on one of the other spiritual practices. But in times of crisis, when you're having a crisis in your own life, it's really hard to develop a spiritual practice. It's really hard to get that deep and working. It's kind of like trying to create a path through the brambles when things are difficult. But when you practice during good times, then when things get challenging, when things get difficult, it's like you already have this well-worn path through the brambles that's easy for you to travel and easy for you to find your way. It's easier when you practice during the good times so that when times are more challenging, it's easier to drop into your own inner peace or that place of security that lives inside of you or your own well-being. If you practice when things are easier, then when things are tough, it's like you've already made deposits in your spiritual bank account and you have something to draw from, to draw on. Doing spiritual practices now enables you to then, when the world is crazy or your life is crazy, then you are already clear about what it is that is sacred to you. You are already clear about how it is that you want to live. And then that guides you in the choice making then. So as we do that spiritual practice now on a regular basis, then when the times are tough, it's easier to lean into that and to find that peace and well-being and to access your own spirit. And then as we continue to do that, we will have a greater sense of well-being and have a greater sense of security and be able to live from the fullness of our own selves and from the beauty of our own spirit. And so blessings to you on this path, walking this spiritual path, living this spiritual life, discovering your own spiritual nature, your own goodness, the presence of the divine that indwells your own beingness. So blessings to you. And so I invite you to join me in an affirmative prayer. And so how good it is just to simply turn within, to let go of the world and its busyness and just to rest in that presence. For I recognize that it is right here where I am. It is right there where you are. In fact, the fullness and the allness and the wholeness of spirit is present at every point in space, at every moment in time. We live in that one whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. We live in that one that is the very essence of peace and goodness. That is the very essence of intelligence and harmony. That is the very thing that acts as unconditional support for each and every single one of us. And so I know the only thing that is required is that we turn to it, that we lean into it. And so I recognize that it is never further than our own breathing, because it is innate to our beingness. It is the very essence of our spirit, the essence of our soul, the fabric that we are made out of. And so today we walk in that presence. And in everything we do, we are led and we are guided. It speaks to our hearts and to our souls of what is true. It speaks to our hearts and souls of who we are, of what is important and sacred and valuable to us as spiritual beings. And it leads us into this life of fulfillment and of joy and of abundance and of being of service to humanity simply by being the love and the beauty of spirit that we are. And so that is how we show up in this world. And so I know that anything and everything that has been blocking this great expression of spirit right now is dissipating in this light. For anything that is unlike spirit has nothing to support it. And so we just stand in this light of goodness, this light of plenty, this light of unconditional love and support. And we show up as the godlings that we are. And for this, I am grateful. And so I release this prayer into the creative law of this universe, knowing that it is unfolding itself right now. And in gratitude, we accept this. And it is our experience. And so I release this prayer and I say, and so it is. And so I have a couple of invitations for you. One is we will be at Hartwell Park next Sunday at 10 a.m. I invite you to join us there. We will be sending out a blurb that has directions. If you check out our Facebook page, Living Beyond Limits, member of Centers for Spiritual Living, there's a map on there of where we will be. We will be resuming connection and spiritual practice this coming Thursday for the next 4 Thursdays at 7 p.m. We would love to have you join us for that. That is absolutely a spiritual practice that is rich and fulfilling. So if you aren't on our email list, you can email us, and you would like to be, you can email us at livingbeyondlimitscsl@gmail.com, and we will make sure that you get on that list. We are continuing to do Ministry of Prayer, so if you have a prayer request, you can email us or send that to Barbara Conant. And that we still have prayer shawls. So if you'd like to be wrapped in that energy of prayer or gift that to someone who would like to be wrapped in the energy of prayer, contact Barbara Conant and she will get that to you. And so I hope to see you next week. I would love to see you on Thursday night at 7 o'clock on Connection and Spiritual Practice. And it's between now and then, know that you are loved and that the presence of the infinite is always right where you are. Blessings to you.